It was the sound of water slapping against wood that finally pulled me out of the trance. Abby's hand was cold in mine, her breath ragged, not from fear, but exhaustion. We had been up on that roof for hours. My jeans were soaked past the knees, my phone nearly dead. I had texted my mother 3 times. "We're trapped. Please help." That last message, marked read at 4:52 p.m., never got a reply. No, "Are you okay?" Not even a thumbs up, just silence. And that silence roared louder than the thunder overhead. I glanced at Abby, brushing the wet strands from her face. She didn't ask if help was coming. At 14, she'd already learned the most dangerous kind of waiting is the one that depends on family. The next day, after a neighbor with a boat helped us out, I got a call from my cousin saying Valora, my mother, was hosting flood victims at her place. I almost laughed. 3 miles away, she had strangers eating chili in the kitchen while her own daughter was bailing water from her living room with a salad bowl. When we arrived at her house, Valora hugged us, right there on the front porch, like a mother in a Hallmark movie. "You poor things," she said loud enough for her neighbor to hear. But when the front door closed, her face changed. "We're packed full," she whispered. "Leora's here with her debate friends, and the guest room's taken, but there's space in the garage. It's just for a couple of nights." The way she said it, "you and the girl," like Abby was a distant acquaintance, not her only granddaughter. I said nothing, just nodded and followed her around to the side door. The garage smelled like wet cardboard. There was a twin mattress on the concrete, a box fan rattling in the corner, and a single lamp flickering like it was tired too. The family dog, Max, was sprawled out on a plush cushion in the hallway inside. He looked at us like we were the intruders. "Valora offered us a blanket, just until Sunday," she repeated, before shutting the door. I heard it click locked behind her. Abby tried to make it light. She bounced on the mattress, said, "Hey, this isn't so bad. It's like camping." But her eyes gave her away. She curled into herself like she wanted to disappear between the cracks in the cement floor. I laid beside her later, pretending not to hear the laughter from the living room, the soft clinking of silverware, the music playing from Valora's favorite oldies playlist. They were having dinner. No one asked if we'd eaten. Abby's breathing evened out, but I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling panels warped with humidity. My mind raced, not with sadness, but clarity. This wasn't about temporary inconvenience, it was about position, placement. We were in the garage because that's exactly where they thought we belonged. I could have said something, raised hell, but I didn't. Oh, not yet. There's a kind of grief that doesn't shout. It sits in your lungs like smoke. And that night, under the hum of a garage fan, I realized something. This flood didn't wash away my home. It washed away my last illusion of family. Dinner that night smelled like rosemary and garlic and too much pretense. From where Abby and I stood in the doorway of the dining room, everything sparkled. Polished silverware, cloth napkins folded into fans, a centerpiece of faux fall leaves, even though it was July. Valora always had a flair for presentation, even if the substance beneath was rotting. She floated around the table assigning seats, smiling that overly rehearsed smile. "Colton, right here. Seraphine, across from Leora. And Max can stay by my feet. He never begs." Not a single word about Abby. Not even a glance. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. In families like mine, seating arrangements say more than blood tests ever could. We took the hint. Abby drifted to the kitchen to get a glass of water, while I stood by the door, watching the family act out their harmony like a stage play. Someone made a joke about Valora's green bean casserole being more famous than the mayor. Laughter erupted, forced and too loud. I wanted to leave right then, but I didn't. Not yet. When Abby returned, she hovered near the table, waiting. The last piece of baked chicken rested on a serving dish like a dare. She reached for it, tentative. Valora didn't raise her voice. Didn't have to. "Oh, that's for Leora, sweetheart. Let's not be selfish." There it was, the blade hidden behind a smile. Abby's hand froze midair, then slowly retreated. "Sorry," she murmured. No one else reacted. They just kept eating like it hadn't happened. Like she hadn't just been cut down in front of them. I locked eyes with Valora, and she didn't flinch. Of course she didn't. This wasn't new. This was her version of discipline, Pretty words with sharp edges, and she made sure they always landed where they'd sting the most. Later, after dinner had disbanded and the house settled into its usual hush, I went to grab a blanket from the laundry room. That's when I saw it, Abby's cookie box, the one she had carefully decorated the night before the flood, with a sticky note on top that read, "To Nana, made with love." It was sitting in the trash, unopened. The edges of the box were soggy, the note smudged from moisture. I stared at it for a long minute before picking it up. Abby had spent an entire evening baking those cookies. She'd even used the sprinkles Valora liked, little orange pumpkins, even though it wasn't close to Halloween. I found Abby sitting on the mattress in the garage, pretending to scroll her phone. I sat down beside her and held out the box. She looked at it, then at me. "Maybe she's cutting back on sugar," she said with a forced shrug. I didn't argue. I didn't need to break her narrative with my truth. Sometimes, when someone you love makes you feel disposable, you craft excuses just to soften the blow. We sat in silence for a bit, just the two of us, lit by the dim glow of the single lamp Valora had left out for us. "She really doesn't like me, does she?" Abby asked quietly. It wasn't even a question, just a confirmation. I took a breath, steady and deliberate. "It's not that she doesn't like you," I said. "It's that she doesn't see you." Abby didn't respond. She just nodded, and I watched her pull the blanket up to her chin, curling her legs under her body the way she did when she was younger, when the world felt too big. I stayed up longer, unable to sleep. The fan in the corner clunked every third rotation. It gave the room rhythm, something to focus on besides the ache in my chest. It's funny how people think cruelty has to be loud, that it comes in screaming matches or slamming doors. But that's not the kind that sticks. The kind that lasts is quiet. It shows up as empty chairs, as uneaten cookies, as dinner conversations that skip your name. You don't have to scream to erase someone. You just stop including them. Eventually, they get the message. But it wasn't until the photo wall revealed who belonged that I knew we were never meant to stay. The scent of leftover gravy lingered in the air when I tiptoed into the kitchen just after sunrise. I was hoping for 10 quiet minutes, maybe a lukewarm cup of coffee before anyone else got up. But the dining room lights were still on, the long wooden table untouched since last night's spectacle. 8 place settings remained pristine, glasses half full, forks resting diagonally on plates like the guests had just stepped away, and the 9th chair pushed off to the corner like it never belonged. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, arms folded, staring at the table like it might finally say what nobody else had. Abby walked in quietly behind me, her footsteps soft as if she didn't want to disturb the arrangement. Her eyes flicked to the displaced chair, then back down to the floor. She didn't comment, didn't ask questions. She didn't have to. She'd learned the choreography of exclusion before she learned how to drive. Later that morning, as Valora busied herself outside pretending to sweep a perfectly clean porch, Abby tugged on my sleeve. "You seen the photo wall lately?" I followed her down the hall past the old record player and the cracked vase Valora insisted was antique, though I knew it came from a yard sale in Baton Rouge. On the right wall, framed memories stretched from one end to the other. Smiling faces at graduations, weddings, vacations in Destin and San Diego. My sister Seraphine, her 3 kids, Leora posing in a pageant crown. Even Colton, my ex-husband, made the cut, standing beside Valora, grinning like he'd earned a permanent spot. But there was no picture of me, no Abby, not from childhood, not from high school, not even a school portrait Valora used to keep on the fridge, erased. Abby stood silent, arms crossed tightly. I could tell she'd been here before, probably more than once, probably alone. I swallowed hard, but not from sadness. This wasn't grief. It was documentation. "You know you're invisible," I said quietly, "when a wall forgets you ever existed." Abby didn't respond right away. She just stared at the collage of curated affection that excluded us entirely. Then she mumbled, "Maybe she just hasn't printed ours yet." She said it with no real belief, just enough hope to keep her voice from cracking. I didn't correct her. What would be the point? Sometimes protecting a child doesn't mean giving them the truth. It means letting them hold on to their version of it, just a little longer. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Come on, kid. Let's get some air. We walked outside and sat on the edge of the driveway where the concrete was still cool. Max, Valora's dog, came up and sniffed my hand, then patted away like we weren't worth barking at. The quiet between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was familiar, honest. My mind wandered back to last night. Valora had waved me off when I offered to grab an extra stool for Abby. We didn't expect her, she had said. They expected the flood. They expected the inconvenience, but they hadn't expected my daughter because they'd never truly included her in the first place. And now, seeing that wall, I realized this wasn't about bad manners or crowded rooms. This was about a system, a curated family identity in which Abby and I were no longer useful, not wanted, not framed. I wasn't going to fight for a seat anymore. I wasn't going to beg for acknowledgement. I was going to remember. I was going to take note of every omission, every crooked smile, every lie dressed in tradition. Because when people erase you, the smartest thing you can do is make yourself unforgettable. It started with a towel, or more precisely, the lack of one. Abby had just finished her shower and was calling from the garage for a dry one. Valora didn't keep extra linens in the hall closet anymore, so I checked Seraphine's old room. The door wasn't locked, just pushed in enough to signal, "Don't." I knocked, waited, then stepped in. The room was untouched, just as I remembered it from when we were teenagers. Except for the tall, slim cabinet in the corner. The left door sat slightly ajar. I pulled it open without thinking. Inside were stacks of manila folders, some labeled in Valora's handwriting, others highlighted like someone had been cross-referencing them. Tucked between two old tax files, I found it. A legal envelope stamped "Final Copy." My hands trembled before I even read the names, but there it was, neat, unemotional. Valora's estate, house, assets, all to Seraphine and Lyora. My name? Not a line, not a clause, not even a footnote. A sticky note clung to the last page, Valora's cursive looped in blue ink. Reviewed with Mom. Final. I stood there, frozen, not with shock, but with something colder. They were preparing for my disappearance before I'd even arrived. I was never part of the future plan. I was the loose end they'd already decided to cut. I closed the cabinet gently. No door slamming, no raised voices, just the sound of something final echoing in my chest. Back in the garage, Abby was brushing her wet hair, humming to herself with that worn-out brush I'd been meaning to replace. She looked up when I entered and asked, "Are we staying long?" I tried to muster a yes, or a maybe, something neutral, but my mouth couldn't lie fast enough. She nodded before I answered. "It's okay. Lyora apologized today. Kind of." I paused. "Kind of?" Abby shrugged, the same shrug she used when her teachers said something off, but she didn't want to cause trouble. After Nana mentioned the scholarship committee checks in on family dynamics, Lyora said, "I'm sorry you felt left out." There it was, theater, not truth. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Abby had already seen through it, and pretending otherwise would only cheapen her clarity. Later that night, as I folded our few clean clothes and tried not to think about what else might be in Seraphine's cabinet, I noticed Abby staring at her phone. I glanced over her shoulder. The screen was open to a message thread. Lyora. "Just had to say something. Nana said it'd look good for the board." Abby didn't cry. She just stared, then quietly turned her phone face down. I sat beside her and exhaled slowly. "Forgiveness isn't a performance," I said. "And you don't owe anyone closure who never opened a door." She nodded. Then, just above a whisper, she said, "I'm tired of pretending they don't mean it." So was I. That night, after Abby fell asleep, I pulled out the old laptop I kept under the mattress. I opened a new folder, Documents for Departure. Inside, I began saving copies of what I'd seen, photos of the will, old emails, bank transfers I'd made to cover Valora's medications, receipts from the year I paid off Seraphine's college loan. Not for court, not for drama, for clarity. If they wanted me erased, I'd make it official, on my terms. It was time to stop trying to be included in something that had already replaced me. By midday, the house was buzzing like a stage set before opening night. Voices floated through the thin walls of the garage. Valora calling out for platters, Seraphine arranging centerpieces, Leora practicing a thank you speech loud enough to sound unrehearsed. Abby and I were folding laundry on the concrete floor. She was humming softly to herself, flipping socks into pairs. I tried not to let the ache in my chest ruin the moment. Just focus on the mundane, I thought. Pretend this was normal. Then came the applause. It rolled through the walls like thunder. I paused mid-fold and stood. Abby looked up, her smile faltering. "I'll check," I said, and walked toward the main house. The television in the living room was broadcasting the church's charity gala live. Valora stood at a podium, arms outstretched like a revival preacher. Her voice was clear, well-practiced. "We're so blessed," she said, pausing just enough for dramatic effect. "None of our family was directly impacted by the flood, but we know others weren't so lucky." The audience clapped. A few gave standing ovations. I stood at the edge of the room, unseen, watching her soak in the glory. Her hair was curled just so, her blouse ironed to perfection. The camera caught her smile, but not her omissions. She didn't just forget us, she erased us. Publicly. I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I walked back to the garage, sat beside Abby, and opened my laptop. I rewound the live stream, clipped the segment, and attached it to an email. I added 3 photos, the garage mattress, Abby curled in a hoodie on the floor, and her FEMA-issued ID from the temporary shelter. I sent it to the gala sponsors, the church board, and the local women's coalition. No subject line, no commentary, just the truth. Because facts don't need flair when they're that brutal. An hour later, the mail truck pulled up to the curb. Abby ran out and came back holding a letter with a FEMA logo on it. Her name was typed neatly on the front. She opened it carefully, like it might fall apart in her hands. Inside was a certificate of commendation, official, stamped, and real. A thank you for assisting in food distribution and logistics during the community response effort. Her name printed in bold. Abby read it once, then again, then looked at me like she wasn't sure if she could believe it. "You did good, sweetheart," I said, my voice softer than usual. "Even if your family doesn't see it, people who matter do." She smiled, really smiled, not the tight one she wore at dinners. That night, after she went to sleep, I poured myself a glass of water, sat on the floor, and opened a new folder on my laptop. Exit plan. I filled it with the photos, the email confirmations, old receipts, the will scans, and now, Abby's FEMA letter. If they wanted to talk legacy, let's start with honesty. Because the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs a moment loud enough to echo. 2 days after the gala, I walked into the living room expecting silence and got Colton instead. He sat on Valora's couch like he'd been there all along, legs crossed, a coffee mug in hand he surely didn't pour himself. Valora perched beside him, glowing with satisfaction, while Seraphine hovered with a folder tucked under her arm. I paused in the doorway, waiting for someone to explain. No one did. "Colton's helping us work through some legal paperwork," Valora offered like she was announcing a church raffle. "He's got great insight on property strategy." Colton gave me a tight-lipped grin. "It's just an idea, shared assets, keeping everything aligned across the family. It's about unity, Darla." He always did know how to spin selfishness into strategy. He wasn't here for Abby. He wasn't here for me. He was here for his cut. Valora's voice softened, but not for my benefit. "He wants to make things right." Right for whom? I didn't answer. I didn't throw a fit. But my hand clenched so hard around the doorknob that I felt the plastic dig into my palm. That afternoon, Abby and I stopped by the diner near the edge of town. She needed a break. I needed coffee that wasn't filtered through Valora's filtered morality. A girl about her age walked up to our booth holding a milkshake and said, "Hey, aren't you Valora Kincaid's granddaughter?" Abby gave a careful nod. The girl tilted her head. "My mom said your grandma told the church y'all made the flood sound worse than it was. That true?" She sipped her drink casually, then added, "Your grandma doesn't like you, huh?" Abby didn't flinch. Didn't say a word. I did. "Sweetheart, you don't need to explain the people who failed you. Their actions already speak fluently." The girl blinked, shrugged, and walked off like she'd just asked the time. I watched Abby stir her straw in silence. It wasn't anger in her face. It was that tired resignation I knew too well. That evening, back at Valora's, I found Colton in the garage going through old boxes. My boxes. He held a file in his hand like it belonged to him. "You've got a lot of paperwork here," he said, acting casual. "If you're looking for a signature, you're wasting your time," I said, stepping in. He blinked. "Darla, come on. This isn't a fight. I didn't survive a flood just to drown in your negotiation." I walked past him, grabbed the original property deed I'd kept folded between two old school yearbooks, and pointed to the highlighted section. 50%. Out of pocket. Mine. He had no retort, just that familiar look of someone recalculating a plan that suddenly got expensive. That night, I didn't argue with Valora. I didn't scream at Seraphine. I didn't write long emails or slam doors. Instead, I opened my laptop again and started pulling every file that had my name on it. Every utility bill, tax return, mortgage record I had helped fund. I copied it to a private drive, let them draft whatever they wanted, let them smile through another Sunday brunch about how tight-knit this family was. I wasn't going to stop them, but I wasn't going to be part of the performance either. I was done being an asset in someone else's estate plan, because the louder they got about legacy, the clearer I became about my exit. The house felt like a set on opening night. Chatter and casserole smells filled the halls while Valora floated from room to room, hosting extended family like she was queen of a kingdom she hadn't earned. People she barely called on birthdays were now being served sparkling cider in etched glasses. She called it a casual evening to reconnect. I called it damage control in pearls. Abby and I kept to the edges, me leaning against the wall near the patio door, her scrolling quietly on her phone, perched beside the bookshelf no one touched. Seraphine made a point of greeting everyone twice. Leora did laps in her sundress like she was running a charm offensive. When Valora finally stood up to give a toast, her voice lifted with all the theatrics of a southern pastor. "This family," she began, pausing as if the word itself gave her authority, "has always stood on unity. We don't always agree, but we love each other equally. That's what makes us strong." I didn't move. Abby did. She stood slowly, pulled her phone from her pocket, and tapped the screen once. The room fell into a stillness I hadn't felt since the water rose around our house. Valora's voice came through the speaker, tinny but unmistakable. "She and her mother, charity cases. We don't need their drama dragging us down." A fork clattered to the floor. Someone gasped. One of Seraphine's boys murmured, "What was that?" The recording kept playing, Valora's tone flat, matter-of-fact, surgical. "I've done enough. Let someone else babysit their pity parties." Abby didn't say a word. She just held the phone steady. Valora turned white, then red. Her lips parted, but no defense came out. Leora froze mid-sip. Seraphine stared at the fireplace like it might give her instructions. Colton, who had arrived late and unannounced, set down his glass without sipping. I didn't look at anyone but my mother. Her jaw clenched. I could see her calculating whether denial would serve her or make things worse. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't beg to be heard. It just waits for silence to expose it. Valora took a shaky breath and opened her mouth to speak, but the moment was already gone. The room had heard it. The mask had slipped. One of our distant cousins stood up and quietly walked out. Another followed. No slamming, just exit. Abby locked her phone and slid it into her back pocket. I placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and we turned to leave. We didn't slam the door. We didn't look back. Outside, the air was cooler than it had been in days. The cicadas had gone quiet. Even Max, the dog, didn't bark. Abby asked softly, "Was that too much?" "No," I said. "It was just enough." We walked down the driveway, past the car I used to lend Valora when hers broke down, past the mailbox I once painted for her when she was sick. We walked past everything I used to believe mattered, because sometimes the loudest goodbye is the one where you don't say a word. We didn't need to yell. We just needed to stop covering for people who weren't family, only owners of bloodlines. And when the door closed behind us, I didn't feel like I'd lost a family. I felt like I'd left a house full of strangers. 2 mornings after the recording, the house went back to pretending. Valora's smile returned, Just a little tighter. Seraphine kept her distance, though she still posted filtered selfies with captions like, "Family first." Colton made himself scarce, likely waiting to see which side would be worth backing. But no one brought up the voice that had echoed through the room like a match struck in dry grass. That morning, Colton showed up with something under his arm. He didn't say hello, didn't look me in the eye. He just set the case down in the garage and left. Abby opened it slowly. Her old guitar, waterlogged during the flood, but somehow saved. The one she used to strum on the porch in spring while singing to cicadas and making up lyrics about homework and watermelon. She ran her fingers over the worn wood. "Do you want to keep it?" I asked. She nodded, soft and sure. "It's from before," she said. "Doesn't mean I forgive, just means I remember." I smiled. Sometimes, keeping something is not about the giver. It's about who you were when you had it. She leaned it gently against the wall, as if it had always belonged there. We spent the rest of the day packing. I didn't say it out loud, but we both knew. The line had been drawn, not out of anger, but resolve. There was nothing left to salvage, not even the appearance of peace. In our last box, I placed only what mattered: the FEMA letter, Abby's certificate, a copy of the original will, and a framed photo of her standing with her science teacher, holding a ribbon that said, "State Finalist." I left the rest behind: the clothes we'd outgrown, the gifts we never asked for, and the quiet hope we used to cling to. That maybe, this time, they'd treat us like we belonged. We were never meant to stay, just long enough to learn why we shouldn't. That evening, just before sunset, I knocked on Valora's door. She answered in her signature apron, mascara slightly smudged, as if she'd been preparing for the perfect line. "We're not asking for anything," I said. "Just leaving this." I handed her a thick envelope. Inside, the formal revocation of financial support, a breakdown of every expense I'd covered since 2017, and a notarized copy of the deed showing exactly how much I'd paid into the house she now called her own. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. "After everything we did for you," she muttered. "You didn't raise me," I said, calm and clear. "You tolerated me. And now, I'm done being tolerable." We left without another word. The drive away felt like slipping off a coat I hadn't realized was soaked through. That night, just as the power blinked out from the evening storm, Valora stepped onto the porch and found a flashlight propped against the doorframe. Next to it, a folded piece of paper. In Abby's handwriting, "This time we saved ourselves. Abby." I don't know how long she stood there, holding that note. I wasn't there to see it. But I like to think the silence finally had weight. That maybe, just maybe, she realized what it meant to be left behind. Not with fury, but finality. There won't be a reunion. Just a quiet life, finally our own,